So I want to introduce David Brown. David has been the corporate medical director for Canadian Imperial Bank of Commerce since 1987. He is a fellow of the Canadian Board of Occupational Medicine and has served on the executive of several national professional bodies. His work in the fields of disability management and corporate health risk management has been recognized internationally. Most recently, he has served on the technical committee that developed the Canadian Standard on Psychological Health and Safety in the Workplace. Originally from Northern Ireland, he has retained most of his accent, and his passion for horses. I think that's it. No, wait a minute. No, that's it. Okay, good enough. All right, welcome, David. Thank you very much.
So, 2 weeks ago, I was down in Washington, Dallas to be precise, at the National Business Group on Health, and felt a little bit odd when I was there before this plane came in with Ebola, but on the way home developed pneumonia and found myself in hospital. So this is my second outing since coming out of hospital. So I'm running on about 40% capacity, so if I would ask your indulgence if I suddenly splutter and cough. I'm told I'm no longer infectious, so you can all move a little closer. We're all very familiar with this animal, and I bring it up today for two reasons. First of all, anybody know why geese fly in formation? Yes. It's more efficient. And that's precisely what we believe in. So you see them gathering this time of year, doing their damage on every lawn for miles around, and they've got one thing on their mind, and it's Florida. So they set off and you honk, honk. Where are you? Oh, I'm going to Florida. Honk, honk. And then they take turns and they fly on. How they know to go to Florida is beyond me. And how they know to come back to my lawn is beyond me as well. But they do fly in formation, and we ascribe great wisdom to these geese. And I would say to you, this is the perfect description of how disability management and health management has been managed pretty well around the globe for the last 50 years. We all fly in formation, honking to each other to make sure that we're all in formation, but nobody has given really any magic thought as to where we're going and what the purpose really is. And so I'm going to start out with a fairly nasty comment and say, if today, the outcome of today's workshop is an agreement to enshrine or somehow tamper with the current state of the way that we manage disability, please have your lunch and go home. The status quo is no longer acceptable. And so this is actually a very important meeting. And I would say to you, if it's some reenactment of what we do today, let's go home. The second thing I bring up, the geese thing, is that I'm not sure many of you are great readers of Konrad Lorenz. He was a psychologist from the 1960s. Oh, I see some people nodding. Oh, my goodness. Konrad wrote a book on aggression. And actually, one of his fundamental theses is to do with the stylized aggression behavior of geese. And that largely describes our legal system today as a stylized form of goose aggression. And so now I've insulted everybody. Any lawyers in the room? Everybody's a lawyer. Oh. All right, look, enough hilarity. All right. So I was asked to come along and describe what we've been doing at CIBC. And really, back in the mid-90s, CIBC, I was then still on my first president, on my fifth at the moment. We sort of noticed that our general employee satisfaction was down, our customer satisfaction was down, and we also noticed that our disability rates were going up, and that a lot of the issues seemed to be psychological in nature. The nature of how things were causing people to be sick were more psychological in nature. And so we embarked on some research. We developed first of all, we started out with a strategy. We said we have to move away from outcome management to risk management. And so we laid out a playing field for which that was the agreed upon structure. And we started to do a research into what were the actual risk factors. And we engaged Carleton University and Linda Duxbury, whom I'm sure many of you know. And she did what was the very first of her supportive manager studies. And in essence, we found that the state of the relationship between a manager and their employee was the single most important factor in an employee's health. It predicted just about everything. I'm not going to labor that because we've got a very limited amount of time. And so CIBC's focus since the late 90s has been on that relationship. We have multiple measures in place. The stress offset score, the SSIX, which are now part of the psychologically safe workplace measurement systems. We also have tracked work limitations so that we know that when the SSOS dips, what aspects of people's abilities are impacted, whether it be interpersonal, timeline management, physical aspects of the work, things like that. We actually have that data, and so we try to follow that on an advance, try to manage the risk side of things. One of the other things that became very clear to us was, if you believe any of the work from Michael Marmot on control and stress and his seminal work on organizational justice, and I'm not going to labor that here too much, you start to see that when this relationship is strained, and it might be strained because there's a disagreement, so we focused on decent dispute resolution situations. It might be about an illness that's caused somebody to have reduced ability or ability to be at work. And we also realized that we had to focus in on accommodation a little bit. So a lot of the health and well-being strategy of CIBC has been data measurement, but then focused in on a program, on a policy and program approach to try and impact health in a very positive way. So that now we get down to the disability management. So that was my promo. But before we got down into the weeds of the processes that we now follow at CIBC, we sat down with the senior management team and we thought that we had to take a very principled approach to this. And as you know, senior executives are very clear about what they like and what they dislike. And none of them wanted to be dealt with in a cookie cutter fashion. They wanted to be dealt with on a case-by-case basis. And so that also flies in the face of all the disability guidelines and bumps that we get from the US on recommendations about disease-based lengths of absences, which is just force majeure, as we know. I mean, when you look at something like depression, average duration, 60 days, plus or minus 30, well, what does that mean? I don't know if those numbers are correct, but they sound right. So they wanted to have a case-by-case approach, where you actually listen to what was going on with me and try to work out something for me. The other thing we said, look, we have responsible adults at CIBC. We trust them with everybody's money. Now, we've got a few sort of rules about that, but we generally trust people very, very. So when things go wrong and somebody's away from work, why do we bring everybody and their cousin and slam them between the manager and the employee to tell us how to manage our way through it? And so we said the actual fundamental piece of this is something that's owned by the manager and the employee. And what we need to do is align all of our services to support that relationship because, frankly, the manager knows about the ability of the organization to try and accommodate or work around a situation. The employee hopefully has some understanding of what their abilities are and where their deficits are. And so if you can work on that and help those two people through and apply help where it's required, you're likely to have a happier outcome. The other thing that became apparent to us was that whether somebody had a work injury, it's a stress leave, or whatever it was, regardless of what system, and if you're a national organization and you've got compensation boards all up and down the country, you can go haywire with process. We just said we will integrate. We will set a standard of how we handle people in our organization that is above that of all of these different groups, and then we'll do the paperwork that they require. So integration became fundamental. I'm going to harp on about accommodation on a fairly regular basis, but we also said that if you halfway believe the Canada Labour Code or any of the provincial regulations about accommodation, we made, I don't know what we made last year, but it was $1 billion plus. Undue hardship for us is sort of a fairly high hurdle. So was the whole notion of utmost good faith for the lawyers in the room. There's an expectation of a CIBC to be there for its folks. So let's actually make a real attempt on the accommodation front. Early intervention doesn't mean sort of forms coming in 3 weeks after somebody's away and looking at forms and not communicating or whatever. Early intervention means right up in front. In our case, it's 5 days. But anything that we will do will reflect our core values. And they're not just something that's on the wall that we sort of look at and go, oh, yeah, I memorized that, and the current CEO agrees with these, so I'll say I agree. We actually, any of our programs, and that also includes people, because we've all run into situations where the lifetime of a job has expired, or the relationship has expired. Well, why mangle people and put them through inordinate permutations? If the relationship is coming to an end, we have a way of dealing with that. And the way I look at this is, imagine you're on a ship that's crossing the Atlantic, and you run into an iceberg or something like that, or somebody falls over. Something less dramatic. Somebody falls over the side. What you would do naturally is just throw them a life ring. But the ship isn't going to stop in a few feet. So you actually have to think beyond that and not just throw them a life raft, you have to help them get onto another ship. And so when we talk about values, it's not just values of day-to-day inside the organization, it's if we're broken, helping the person along. Anyway, so that's the principles. The pillars from our perspective and were in this particular order, and I see Patrick in the audience here, and I know Patrick, his own research would support pretty well this. We felt that the fundamental piece in disability management was that of the organization's ability to adapt. And so our processes really fall into a very simple, repeatable unit. We ask our employees, when they're feeling well enough, to come in and sit down with their manager, and with the help of an external facilitator, be prepared to talk about what their abilities are with their manager and the facilitator to see what we need to do to try and meet them partway. Now, the role of the facilitator is to actually organize the meetings, because our managers don't have an awful lot of time. To keep the medical stuff off the table, because managers can only manage the workplace. They have no expertise, nor should they have expertise or knowledge of medical illnesses and how that's impacting. And they also actually record the outcomes of the meetings and are there as a support. So our very slick managers can handle one of these meetings, and essentially the facilitator is a note taker. But for new managers or people, or this is a little bit more difficult, the facilitator will step in and take a more proactive role. But this repeats. We look at what the person's abilities are as they relate to their work. We see if we can meet them partway or not. And by the way, one meeting is not, a positive outcome after one meeting is not a failed meeting, because they've actually supported the relationship. So occasionally we get a hole in one. I've never had a hole in one in my life. It takes me 3 to get down the fairway, and I'm praying for the green at that point. But the focus is solely on adaptation. And the manager's role is also to represent the workplace. Because you can't have people coming in doing, I'm going to say disruptive, not disruptive, that's the wrong word, but we respect people, so we'll do meaningful things. And so and you've got to respect the co-workers as well. So they're meant to represent that a little bit. By the way, so there are usually 3 people at the meeting. We say you can bring whomever you like to the meeting. Anybody else who's at the meeting has to be quiet. If you want to have a discussion, if you've got a union rep or a cousin or your spouse that you wanted to bring with you to the meeting, if you want to have a discussion with them, go ahead, go nip outside, have your discussion, come back. But the conversation is actually between 3 people. But you can have whomever you want there to support you. So that just goes on. The vast majority of our cases resolve in a couple of meetings to, I think it comes out to about 2 3/4 meetings per short-term disability absence. And there is no interaction with the medical practitioner. There are no forms from the medical practitioner. It's all done between the manager and the employee with a facilitator and a coordinator sort of sitting on top. Now, in about 20% of our cases, things don't appear to be moving quite as smoothly as they need to. Now, in the traditional models, somebody's at fault. The doctor's not paying attention, the doctor's asleep at the wheel, the employee's not accessing the care, whatever the bad thing that everybody's doing is. What we do is, the only thing that we do ask employees is to sign a consent to say that, can we talk to your medical practitioner? And so from time to time, we will reach out. And it's not David phoning up the local GP saying, I think you're messing up your patient here. We reach out and say, look, we've been trying to accommodate Fred for the last 6 or 8 weeks, and we haven't actually had a lot of progress. Just want to touch base with you to see if we're missing the point. Is there something different that we should be doing? And that actually opens the door to a fairly fantastic conversation, which is often about access to care or other difficulties, and often leads into the social context within which in an absence might occur, because very rarely does somebody fall ill, and they're so ill because of that, except me, of course, when I had pneumonia, but where their the capability to do the role is solely related to the illness on its own. There's usually a constellation of things or social context within which that happens. So that also gives us an entree into that. So if the physician requires additional help, we haven't called them a jerk, and they don't, which medical school did you go to? We don't say that. So we will offer help if we can. We will facilitate where we can. And we will work on the social context of a case, because if there's a bad, failed relationship with the manager or there's something else going on, my goodness, we need to fix that. The final piece that we get into is the compliance piece. But that's where most people start. I want you to prove that you're sick. And then we have endless forms going backwards and forwards to prove, well, this doesn't really seem like you're sick enough to, you're too sick to be off work. Declined, or need more information. And so the person dutifully goes back to their doctor, and they fill in the forms, and they get rejected again. Well, where's this going? It's going down in flames fairly, very quickly. And I asked this question the other day of some colleagues. Can anybody name what forms a physician is taught to fill in at medical school? There is only one, and we pay a lot of attention to it. It's a death certificate. You want to get that one right. We pay a lot of attention to that one. So imagine you're sitting in a doctor's office. You've been treating a patient, and then you think you've arrived at a conclusion, and out comes the form. There are no two the same. And it asks you all this medical information, which you dutifully fill in. What you don't understand is that the adjudicator at the far end is looking at this medical information in an entirely different context, either with some wretched table of illnesses or something else, and deciding a pass-fail. At CIBC, we consistently over the years turn off benefits in about 1% of cases. 1%. And the thing that will get you into trouble at CIBC is non-cooperation. We expect you to go get good help, and we expect you to participate. And if we feel that that's not happening, then we'll turn your benefits off. That's a very rare event. So the fundamental piece about the CIBC approach is helping. That's what it's all about, helping on every level, either it be in terms of work accommodation, in terms of assisting the medical profession if we need to, trying to fix up any social breaks that we might have, and not getting all bent out of shape by benefits compliance. The outcome of all of this was a 32% drop in the duration of disability absences. And this has been maintained since we introduced this in 1999. 32% from where we were before in the medical model to there. We have fewer relapses because there's an ongoing conversation between the manager and the employee. We can back down without somebody going right off because we have that conversation that's ongoing. We have a markedly reduced confrontation rate because it's hard to get mad when there's a facilitator helping everybody you get through. And when everything's documented to the nth degree, there's no mystery because we're all working off the same deck. It's had a phenomenal, I actually enjoy my role as opposed to dreading, sort of being the Inspector Clouseau of the bank, checking up on doctors. I actually enjoy reaching out and speaking with them. And we stopped counting our savings in the first 5 years at $60 million. Last year, we gave back $45 million to our employees in reduced LTD benefit. So being nice can save you a lot of money. And so if we're going to go forward, everybody, I would like us to open our minds. And we're all, I don't think that looks more like my pond at the end of the garden than Florida. I obviously got the wrong photo. But, we can't just fly in formation the way we have before. Our clients are many and varied. They're sick and injured workers. There are organizations and companies that are with it. And all of the ancillary medical, rehab, legal world that hovers around this. Hover around is a very negative connotation. But, in the periphery of this. The fundamental piece is managing the employee-manager relationship, supporting it through a very difficult phase, and providing help only where it's needed. Patrick's research showed throwing the book with specialist help, this, that, and the other, actually increased the duration of an absence. Am I correct? I haven't lost it all yet. So that's the end of my sermon. I don't know if you're doing questions now or later, but really the CIBC approach is very simple. Get the manager and the employee talking with the help of an external facilitator. Doctors love that because it means that they don't have to advocate against a big bank. They usually do. And so I wish this group great success as you go forward. I hope that we don't just end it at lunchtime today. But I really would impress on you the importance to do something different. Thank you.
So because David is going to be leaving, we thought it would be a good idea just to have a few questions from the floor, because you won't have a chance to talk to him afterwards. So Susan?
The facilitator, what is their...
And can you just project your voice?
Sure.
Because if we don't hand around the mic, maybe then everyone can hear your question.
I have a little bit of a cough too, so. The facilitator skill set, are they a combination of disability management professionals and maybe mediators, or what's the skill set that they are coming to the table with?
That's a fantastic question. So what is the construct of the facilitator, and what sort of person would that be? The number one thing they are is a good communicator. They don't need to have any medical knowledge, because the whole issue is about abilities, communication, documentation. So is the person a people person? Are they got a strong character that, some people try to, our unit, if you want, our repeatable work unit here, is the meeting, accommodate, try, recycle. And some groups of people have tried to slip in some therapeutic or mediation services in there as well. And I actually think that clouds the issue. Now, that's my humble opinion, because I know some organizations do it that way. They've looked at what we do and they said, well, we should do this. And that's fine. What we do, though, is if there is a dispute or there's some other mediation required, we actually make use of our human resources professionals. So our view of what a facilitator is primarily a communicator. The coordinator, who sort of sits in a central role, can be anything. Some of them have a nursing background. Some of them have an adjudicator background. Some of them are ergonomists or whatever. And so we just have this sort of general community. Again, they're high horsepower people. And I'm going to be offensive as I say this, but they're not just a cast-off adjudicator from who's been dispensed by some insurance company somewhere. These are actually high-octane people who have the ability to consult in the general consulting model. This is the coordinators we're talking about. And the general consulting model that is the one that starts from a place of ignorance, tries to get the client to articulate what the problem is, and then works with the client to help resolve that problem. Not the medical, I'll make the diagnosis, I'll write the prescription, this is how we're going to do it. That's the way things are done at the moment. So our facilitators who are local to the process and the manager and the employee, well, we do some of them by phone, high communication skills. Our coordinators are high-octane consultants in the general consulting model.
Another question?
Fantastic question.
Over here? Yep.
Yes.
You're good.
I was just wondering if you could think about the difference between an organization like CIBC and a small business organization, and how you might see or perceive how that type of system could potentially lend itself into a small business organization.
It's a conundrum that I've thought about the odd time in the past. So how do you take something that works on a nice macro scale like this and make it accessible? I actually think that there's a wide open market for like-minded thinkers to provide that service to organizations. And I don't know if you remember the Timothy Eaton Company. Test question these days. And I bring them up because they were actually the first people to experiment with this. And as you know or may recall, they had some difficulty with their long-term disability funds. And a lot of people had been left high and dry by that program. When we actually, when I say we, when the team actually phoned people up, just reaching out and talking to them brought a lot of people off benefit. And so I do believe that, it doesn't have to be as complex as I've made it sound. It can be a lot simpler. And I think there's a role for small organizations to develop a team of facilitators or indeed coordinators. And the other thing that Eaton's pointed out to us was that having a facilitated meeting, which costs about $150, is way more effective than doing an IME. An IME at several $1,000s, all it does is stack people up on one side or the other. Whereas a facilitated meeting, which costs you about that, seemed to work very well. So I think there's a niche market there for a lot of providers up and down there. And if you're creating the standard or whatever the standard might be, if it includes facilitation, if it did, you could align that.
I was going to say one, but two more questions. So we'll take one from this table and then one from this table. Go ahead.
Oh, is it me?
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
I thought, okay, I'm
Yes.
so excited. Sorry. So you mentioned doing that right up front, having that facilitated, mediated meeting right up front to avoid the medicalization, which I think is great. Does it convolute the process, or how challenging is it or successful when it happens after the medicalization has started, or do you just not do that kind of meeting during? So if an STD claim goes forward and it's been medicalized, but then those issues start to surface, that there could have been an opportunity for mediation, which maybe wasn't apparent right from the start, because sometimes it surfaces later. Do you still introduce that mediated process, and how successful is that at that point?
I will lie to your face and say that never happens at our sets. From time to time, it does happen. 42,000 people spread across 10 provinces. Sometimes our processes don't quite connect. But whether it's started out as an epistle that's come in from a physician about so and so needing to have 6 months off or stress leave or whatever the opening bid happens to be, we have found consistently that saying, look, that's nice, it's your physician's opinion, that we will keep in mind, but we would like to at least start a conversation. If you make the conversation about returning to work today, and that's the win-lose, then you're in trouble. What we're trying to do is maintain a relationship through a difficult period and work with people, draw them back as opposed to proving that they need to be back. And so it depends on your attitude when you're going in. And so physicians have a role, they have a place, but it's about making people better, not necessarily telling workplaces what they need to do. Now, that's a voice in the wilderness from time to time, but it's a firm belief that I do.
So we have one last question from this table right here.
What are your national days absent before return to work, and then your national accommodation days on average for your program? So when people are outside to work, how long does it take you on average to get them back in? And then when they're accommodated at work, how long is that accommodation?
Okay, I don't have our current data right at the moment. What I would say to you is we used the Institute for Work and Health quite recently, well, a couple of years ago, to do all the FIs, by the way, have different programs. Our short-term disability, for instance, lasts 6 months, and there are all sorts of changes in long-term disability. And so we actually got the Institute for Work and Health to do an analysis of all of the major FIs, including the insurance companies. Everybody chipped in, and we found ourselves at the better end of that spectrum. I'm just going to leave it at that.
Well, thank you. Thank you very, very much, David.